looking after yourself without feeling guilty. Lots of the people I work with feel bad about taking care of themselves. They equate it with being selfish, then that makes them feel bad, so then they don't do it. Even if they know it would be a good idea, it just feels wrong, and that jams them up. So in this video, I'm going to unpack why ideas around selfishness can be so powerful and get us so stuck, and then give you 5 more constructive perspectives that you can take to help unjam you around that if that's an issue for you. So why can thinking about selfishness be such a problem? Well, first of all, it's because the word selfish is not a compliment. If I called my friend James selfish, he wouldn't be pleased about that. He would think that was a bad thing. And secondly is that we're given this idea usually at a very young age, a kind of age when as little children we do need to learn to stop being selfish, and we're probably all being told don't be selfish. When we're at a certain age we need to stop thinking about ourselves and start considering other people. But at that age our critical faculties haven't fully developed to be able to really understand the subtleties of what that message might mean, and also at a time when we're very vulnerable, so we can take it on with a huge emotional impact that can stay with us even later in life. Also at a time when we're very vulnerable, so we can take it on with a huge emotional impact that can stay with us even later in life. When we're little, when we're children, we learn through generalizations. When your mother or father or someone taking care of you says to you, don't stick your fingers in the electricity socket, then we know that they mean don't stick your fingers in any electricity socket. It's not just this particular one, it's electricity sockets in general. When people tell you don't run across the road without looking, they mean don't run across any road without looking. So it's a really fast way to learn, but it's also very simplistic. So what can sometimes happen is that we've been told as a child, don't be selfish, and then we've generalized that out. So instead of seeing that it meant don't only think about yourself in this one specific situation, we've generalized that out into thinking it means never think about yourself. And the third reason why ideas about selfishness can run quite deep and be quite problematic is that they're given to us at that age, as when we're young children, when we're very vulnerable. A young child knows that it can't survive without adults to look after it. Human children, we're very helpless, and we're hardwired to know that we must keep these adults around us approving of us enough that they will continue to look after us and provide us with food and shelter and all those kinds of things. Because if we don't get that, we could die. So disapproval from an adult carries, for a young child, carries in innately the threat of death. You could get thrown out of the tribe, you could be left on the prairie, and this emotional impact runs very deep, and that too can stay with us even unconsciously into adulthood, when we don't necessarily need the approval of other people so much anymore, but the fear can still be there within us. It's also why fear of being thought selfish is why that also connects to discomfort around belonging and being accepted. So I'm not going to go into the emotional triggers around that in this video. I don't think video is really the right format for it. If you know those kinds of things are an issue for you, you can get in touch and we can work one-on-one together. I also have a self-hypnosis download called Love and Accept Yourself, which can be helpful to help you give yourself the love and acceptance that you might not have been able to connect to as a child. What we are going to do though in this video is I'm going to give you 5 ways you can start thinking more healthily and subtly around selfishness if it's a trigger or a block for you. So the first of these is to realize that it's not a black and white thing. That child's brain that generalizes might have taken on board this idea of don't be selfish and acquired a fear of that being an identity, like being a selfish person, which means a bad person, or a giving person, which means a good person. But actually, like, life is an interplay of all of these things. There are times when it's helpful to think about yourself first, and there are times when it's helpful and appropriate to think about other people first. So it's not a black and white thing. It's a gradation, and it's not about you as a whole person or an identity. It's going to vary according to specific situations. So when you're in that situation, just watch out for the trigger that's making it into an identity of being a selfish, bad person, when really it's just about this one specific time. The second thing you can realize to help you maneuver around the don't be selfish rule is to realize that good advice is relative to where you are now. So if I'm in Scotland and I want to get to London, then telling me to travel south would be great advice. It's getting me towards where I want to be. However, if I was in Paris, then that same advice of travel south would be useless. It'd be worse than useless. It would be taking me further away from where I need to be. In general, I would say most people err on the side of being too selfish. And they need to be given the advice, don't be selfish, because it takes them closer to a healthy balance in their life. And that may be good advice for those people at that time. It may have been good advice for you at a particular time. But if where you're at now is a place where you're thinking about other people too much and you're not considering yourself enough, then that same advice is no longer valid for you now. It's the same as being in Paris and having the advice to travel south. It's not relevant to you now. So the second thing you can do is to realize that advice that might have been helpful at one time in your life, or be helpful and valid for other people at certain times in their lives, may not be useful for you now. You may need exactly the opposite advice. The third thing you can do is actually to realize that the term selfishness is so loaded with baggage that it might just not be a helpful way for you to think about things. If thinking about being selfish and putting yourself first makes you feel bad, and then that bad feeling stops you actually doing it, then maybe we can just move away from that whole loaded emotive area and instead think about fairness or think about balance. So instead of wondering, am I being selfish or not? Think about, am I maintaining a fairness in this relationship? Am I getting towards some kind of balance in how I'm interacting with this person or this group? So that way you can just take out the whole idea of selfishness and think in terms of fairness and balance in a relationship overall. That can often be a great way to sidestep all the triggers and hot buttons around that. And of course, for some people in some circumstances, it might not be a 50-50 balance. If you're looking after children, then maybe 80% of the time your attention is devoted to looking after them and 20% is devoted to looking after you. That might be how you think is a useful way to do it. But you can still bear in mind, okay, if that's gone to 90 and 10, right, that's got out of balance to where I think it should be. I need to be pulling that back again. The fourth thing is to realize that selfishness is not the same as self-care. So selfishness is often about denying something from other people. So making their life worse. But you can look after yourself without denying anybody anything. In fact, sometimes looking after yourself can be a gift to others. So if you never look after yourself, if you always put yourself last, then it's easy to begin to feel drained, feel resentful. Maybe you're not sleeping. Maybe you're getting tetchy with people. Maybe you sort of get into arguments. You aren't as kind or as funny as you normally are. Whereas if you're taking care of yourself, meeting your needs, then it can help you bring your best gifts to the world. The best you that you can be, that can be a gift to everybody else as well. So not only are you looking after yourself, you're also serving the world by bringing yourself into the best state you can be. So you're no longer a burden to others or a drag to be around, but you're flourishing and thriving, and you have plenty of capacity to spare to bring joy to others as well. And the fifth perspective that you could take around this is to realize that it's not a zero-sum game. So if we think about it, how is people often think about this is something like a line like this, with selfish at one end and giving at the other end. And that you can only go along this line. So if you're more selfish, then you're less giving. If you're more giving, then you're less selfish. Sometimes when you look after yourself, you can be more giving. That's the first thing to notice. Also, generally, the connotation would be that this is a bad thing, and that this is a good thing. What I'd like to notice is that giving can sometimes be over-giving, which can also be a bad thing. So a healthier medium might be somewhere around in the middle. But actually, to get away from the whole single dimension way of thinking about it, because that's more healthily, you can think about it like this, that we can have two axes here of being kind to yourself and unkind to yourself. You can be kind to others, and you can be, if you so wish, unkind to others. When you see that, you can see where the old axis would be, that selfish would be here, the old kind of idea of selfish, and being kind to yourself and unkind to others. Over-giving would be here, being kind to others but unkind to yourself. And of course, when you give too much, what can often happen is that you end up here when you're mean and moody and fed up and you're being unkind to yourself and you're being unkind to others. But it also opens up this place here where you can be both kind to yourself, and because you're in a better space, because you're looking after your needs, because you're thriving and flourishing, then that puts you in the best state to be able to be effectively kind to other people too. So it's a win-win that you've got here that you can get. So instead of a single scale like that, seeing this shows you the other options that you've got, and it's not a zero-sum game where one person wins means another person loses. And sometimes you can see where you've been robbing Peter to pay Paul. So you've been self-sacrificing towards one person, like tolerating bullying from your boss, or staying and doing more work than you need to, as a way to sort of be kind to your boss. But then your partner or your children have paid the price for that because you've been home late, you've been fed up, and you've been in a bad mood. And you've not been kinder to people overall. You've been basically like swapping things around, asking one group of people in your life to take up the slack that you've been giving to someone else. But overall, as you're looking after yourself, then you can also be getting better at looking after other people. So that's why the concept of selfishness can be problematic for us, because it's loaded and emotive, and if someone says to you, oh, you've got to be selfish sometimes, you might get it intellectually, but it just feels wrong because it's associated with being sort of bad, because we're taught it at a younger age when we can't properly process it and put it in its right place, and we generalize out rather than seeing that it's situation specific, and because it can trigger a great deal of fear and vulnerability that can stay with us even when we no longer need adults to look after us. And I gave you 5 more helpful ways to think about it, so that seeing that it's not black and white, it's not an identity, it's a scale, and it's situation specific. We talked about good advice being relative to where you are now. So what might have been good advice for you at one time in your life might not be good advice for you now. About reframing the whole thing, instead of selfish and unselfish, into thinking about fairness and balance. Seeing how selfishness is not the same as self-care, and how looking after yourself can actually benefit others too. And fifthly, that instead of a single dimension win-lose line, you can see it in terms of this 2x2 grid, where you can find some win-win outcomes, and instead of it being a zero-sum game, you can actually be making the pie of kindness bigger for everybody. So I hope that's been helpful for you. If you'd like some more help about that, then you can look me up at yourownbestfriend.co.uk. I've got some downloads and programs for you there if you'd like that. If you've liked this video, then please give it a like. If you'd like more like this on how to be a better friend to yourself, you can hit the subscribe button and the little bell so you'll get a notification when I make new videos. And until we meet again, then take very good care of yourself.